Fight Club. 1999 American film. We back out of the webbing of neurons and brain cells as the title credits appear, finding ourselves emerging from a pore on the sweat-glistened skin of the protagonist, our narrator, Edward Norton, as he looks down the barrel of a gun that's been stuck in his mouth. The gun is held by a man named Tyler, Brad Pitt, who checks his watch, counting down to ground zero before he asks if the narrator has anything to say. The narrator mumbles through the gun before it's removed and says more clearly that he can't think of anything. As Tyler looks out of the high-rise window to the dark city below them, the narrator recalls just how he met Tyler before stopping himself and bringing us to the beginning of the story. The narrator tells us he hasn't slept for 6 months. His job as a traveling product recall specialist for a car company doesn't help his insomnia since he must travel often, experiencing bouts of jet lag in addition to the everyday stress of his position, admiring the tiny life of single-serving soap and shampoo at every location. If he can't sleep, he surfs the channels or browses through Fernie, a parody of IKEA, catalogs purchasing the next piece of decor to add to his apartment. He's a self-proclaimed slave of consumerism. He goes to his doctor seeking help, but all the doctor will do is suggest an herbal supplement instead of drugs and that the narrator visit a support group for testicular cancer to see real pain. There, the narrator meets Robert Bob Paulson, Meat Loaf, the big mussy and an ex-bodybuilder and steroid user who suffers from an extreme case of gynecomastia due to hormone treatment after his testicles were removed. Bob is quite willing to hug the narrator in support. Stuck between Bob's enormous breasts, the narrator finally finds peace and bursts into tears. The emotional release allows him to sleep and he subsequently becomes addicted to support groups, mapping out his week attending different meetings and feigning illness. However, the appearance of a woman named Marla Singer, Helena Bonham Carter, throws the narrator's system out of whack. He recognizes her as a tourist, having seen her at multiple meetings including testicular cancer, and he is disturbed by her lies to the point where he can't sleep anymore. After one meeting, he confronts her. She argues that she's doing exactly what he does and quips that the groups are cheaper than a movie and there's free coffee. Instead of ratting each other out, they agree to split up the week and exchange numbers. Despite his efforts, the narrator's insomnia continues. On a flight back from one of his business trips, the narrator meets Tyler Durden. Tyler offers a unique perspective on emergency procedure manuals in the plane, and they strike up a casual conversation. Tyler is a soap salesman, if he's not working nights as a projectionist, and slipping bits of porn between reels at the movie theater where he also works. The narrator arrives at the baggage claim to discover that his suitcase has been confiscated, most likely due to a mysterious vibration, before he taxis home. However, home, a 15-story condominium, and its contents has been blasted into the night by what was theorized to be a faulty gas line. Ignited by a spark from the refrigerator. Having nowhere to go, the narrator finds Tyler's business card and calls him up. They meet at a bar and share a few beers. While the narrator laments losing his possessions, Tyler shares his philosophy of evolving beyond consumer culture and eschewing material gain. In the parking lot behind the bar where Tyler invites the narrator to hit Tyler as hard as he can. The narrator, though puzzled, complies and they engage in a fist fight before sharing a couple of drinks. The experience is surprisingly euphoric and the narrator and Tyler return to Tyler's dilapidated house where it's clear that Tyler is squatting. Tyler and the narrator engage in more fights behind the bar over the coming days, and they soon attract the attention of other tough guys. Finding their little fight ing group growing, Tyler establishes a formal fight club in the basement of the bar where they had their first fight. Membership quickly increases and Tyler and the narrator fashion a series of rules, the first two being the same. You do not talk about Fight Club. The rules are consistently broken, with members inviting their friends to join them. Time and again, Tyler proves his insightful, if unorthodox and immoral, views on life. The narrator meets up with Marla by chance, telling her that he hasn't attended any other meetings because he's joined a new support group for men only. While he still treats her with mild contempt, it's clear that he considers her with interest. When she overdoses on Xanax, she calls the narrator who, tired of her rambling, sets the phone down without hanging up. He discovers later that Tyler picked up the phone, followed the call to Marla's home, and brought her back to the house where they engaged in vigorous sex, much to the narrator's disgust. The next morning in the kitchen, Marla finds the narrator, who is astonished to see her in his house. The narrator's astonishment insults her, and she leaves in disgust. After she leaves, Tyler enters the kitchen and joyfully reveals that he and Marla had sex the night before. He also gravely makes the narrator promise that he'll never mention Tyler to Marla. That night the narrator joins Tyler, while he steals human fat out of the dumpster of a liposuction clinic. Tyler says that the best fat for making the soap he sells comes from human beings. Back in their kitchen, Tyler shows the narrator how to render tallow from the fat. After explaining a bit about the history of soap making, Tyler plants a wet kiss on the back of the narrator's hand and dumps pure lye on the spot, causing a horrific chemical burn. Tyler refuses to let the narrator wash the lye off his hand, saying that water will worsen the burn, and tells the narrator that the burn is a rite of passage. Tyler has burned his own hand in an identical way, and that the horrific pain will make him feel alive. Tyler also forces the narrator to accept allegiance to him, and then neutralizes the burn with vinegar. Later, when they meet with a cosmetic salesperson at a department store, the narrator remarks that Tyler's soap sells for a very high price. The original Fight Club continues to gather more members until Tyler shifts its focus. Their initial members are invited to the house but must stand on the front porch for 3 days without food, water, or encouragement, after which they'll be allowed inside. They must also endure insults from existing members and physical hazing. After they're allowed to join the new group, they are required to shave their heads. Tyler dubs them Space Monkeys. Tyler sets them all to refurbishing the house, performing cleaning chores and cultivating whatever they can in the small backyard garden. Earlier, Tyler had also spent a significant amount of time building bunk beds in the basement for new members. With the narrator, he holds a college dropout, June Kim, at gunpoint and threatens to kill him if he doesn't pursue his dream of becoming a veterinarian. He allows Lou, Peter Icangelo, the owner of the bar where their Fight Club is held, to beat him horribly before coughing blood all over him and demanding to stay in the basement. Horrified, Lou agrees. Tyler gives the club members a homework assignment. They will all pick a fight with a complete stranger and lose. The narrator says it's a much harder task than anyone would think. Bob accosts people in a downtown plaza. Another member antagonizes a priest with a garden hose. After a period of days, Marla leaves and Tyler introduces the narrator to his newest hobby. Using his proficient skills in soap making, Tyler has turned the basement of the house into a laboratory where he uses soap and other ingredients to make explosives. Tyler and the narrator continue managing Fight Club, but this time at a much different frequency. Receiving flack at work, the narrator finally confronts his boss, Zach Granier, with knowledge about substandard practice and negotiates to work from home with increased pay to keep his mouth shut. When his boss objects and calls security, the narrator beats himself up severely so that, by the time security arrives, they are led to believe that the narrator's boss assaulted his employee. Tyler eventually assigns homework to his recruits and preaches to them about the detriments of consumerism and relying on society and authority figures. He proposes to revert back to the time where a man's worth depended on the sweat on his back and where he only used what he needed. This philosophy evolves into what Tyler calls Project Mayhem, and the fighting in basements turns into mischievous acts of vandalism and destruction. Their actions do not go unnoticed, but Tyler manages to show the lead investigator, a police chief, that the very people he's hunting are those that they depend on: waiters, bus drivers, sewer engineers, and more. They threaten the police chief with castration, and the investigation is called off. While Project Mayhem grows, the narrator begins to feel more and more distant from Tyler, and jealousy sets in, making him go so far as to beat up and disfigure one recruit, Jared Leto, because he wanted to destroy something beautiful. As they walk away from this Fight Club meeting, Tyler drives the narrator and two members in a large Lincoln Town car. In the rain, Tyler taunts the narrator, suggesting that he hasn't even begun to live his life to his fullest potential. When he allows the car to drift into oncoming traffic and the narrator grabs the steering wheel, Tyler scolds the narrator for being weak and pathetic. Tyler then admits that he destroyed the narrator's apartment. The narrator finally gives in. Tyler lets the car drift, and they slam head-on into another vehicle. They emerge from the wreck with Tyler exclaiming that the narrator has a new life based on his living through a near-death experience. When Tyler disappears for a while, the narrator is left at home with an ever-increasing band of mayhem members who watch television and laugh at their publicized acts of vandalism. When the narrator demands to know more about their mischief, Bob tells him, "The first rule of Project Mayhem is you do not ask questions." Bob is later killed during a botched sabotage operation, and the narrator seeks to disband the group before things get out of control. He tries to find Tyler and discovers a list of phone numbers he recently used. The narrator trails the list all over the country, discovering that fight clubs have sprouted everywhere. At one particular bar, the bartender addresses the narrator as Sir, which prompts the narrator to ask if he knows him. The bartender, after being assured that he's not being put through a test, tells the narrator that he is Tyler Durden. In shock, the narrator returns to his hotel room and calls up Marla, asking if they've ever had sex. Though irritated, Marla confirms their relationship and states that she knows him as Tyler Durden. Marla hangs up and Tyler suddenly appears in the room and confronts the narrator, telling him he broke his promise to not speak about Tyler to Marla. A few minutes of conversation confirms that they are, indeed, one person. The narrator has insomnia. He can't sleep, so, whenever he thinks he is, or at random parts of the day, Tyler's persona takes over. The narrator faints at the epiphany. When he wakes up, he finds another phone list beside him with calls from all over the country. He returns to his home to find it completely empty, but one bulletin board yields a display of folders detailing certain buildings within the financial district. He finds that each one has been infiltrated by members of Project Mayhem, and that Tyler is planning on destroying them, thereby erasing credit card company records and wiping the slate clean. In a panic, the narrator grabs all the information and reports himself to the local police. However, after telling the inspector everything he knows and being left with two officers, the narrator discovers that the officers are Mayhem members, and they tell him that they were instructed by him to take the balls of anyone who interfered with Project Mayhem, even him. The narrator manages to escape by stealing one of the officers' pistols and runs to one of the buildings set for demolition. He finds an unmarked van in the parking garage filled with nitroglycerin and attempts to disarm the bomb. Tyler appears and goads him, but the narrator successfully disarms the bomb. He and Tyler engage in a fierce fight which appears oddly on the surveillance cameras since the narrator is only fighting himself. The Tyler personality wins and reactivates the bomb, and the narrator brings himself to another building where they can safely watch the destruction. Back at the opening scene, the narrator, with the gun in his mouth, mumbles again and tells Tyler, "I still can't think of anything." Tyler smiles and says, flashback humor." The narrator begs that Tyler abandon the project, but Tyler is adamant. He professes that what he's doing is saving mankind from the oppression of consumerism and unnecessary luxuries, and that there won't even have to be any casualties. The people who work in the buildings are all Mayhem members, completely aware of the plan. Near breaking point, the narrator comes to realize that whatever Tyler does, he can do. He sees Tyler with the gun in his hand and realizes that it's actually in his hand. He puts it up to his own chin and tells Tyler to listen to him. He says that his eyes are open and then puts the gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger. The bullet shoots out of the side of his jaw and Tyler is killed with a gaping wound to the back of his head. As the narrator recovers, members of Project Mayhem arrive with snacks and Marla in tow. Tyler had previously instructed her to be brought to them. Seeing Tyler's wounds, The Mayhem members leave Marla alone with him to fetch some medical supplies. Tyler stands with Marla and tells her that everything's going to be fine as the first detonation ignites the building in front of them. The others on the block soon follow suit, and Tyler takes Marla's hand in his and tells her, "You met me at a very strange time in my life." They watch as the explosives go off and the buildings collapse.